a-rum-ta-da-rum. But gosh, you all know me. Dee-dee-dee-dee. I'll bet most of you have had a toy drum. Bet you've got one somewhere at home right now. How many do? See? Drums are lots of fun, but you know we have work to do too, because we drums are musical instruments, and we're played just about anywhere you hear music. We can play lots of different kinds of music. So today, let's talk about me and my big family, and listen to some of the many voices we have. To begin with, drums and many other musical instruments are called percussion instruments. That's right, percussion. Percussion means the act of striking or hitting an object with force. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because what do you do with a drum? You strike it, don't you? So percussion instruments are those which are struck. You see, we make our sound by the vibration of something solid. If you remember, 3 ways of making sound are 1, vibrating a string, like a violin. 2, vibrating a column of air, like a clarinet. And 3, vibrating something solid, like a drum or a gong. We percussion instruments are just about the oldest instruments in the whole world. People have been clicking their teeth, stamping their feet, finger snapping, toe tapping, and hand clapping for thousands of years. Early man, just like man today, enjoyed getting up and expressing himself by dancing. The rhythm he made with his feet as he danced, and his hands as he clapped, gave him the idea for making the first drum. These first drums were very simple things made out of hollowed-out logs, or sometimes just 2 pieces of wood, or 2 hard stones or shells beaten together in rhythm. You can even make a drum out of your desk or table or the floor, just by tapping your feet or fingers. Has your mother or your teacher ever told you to stop drumming with your fingers? See, you're a drummer yourself. Later, man began making better drums out of wood covered with animal skins. The skins were stretched very, very tightly across the open shell of wood and tied on the sides. This drum was then struck either with the hands or with sticks. And once he had invented a pretty good drum, man didn't waste a minute's time, but went right ahead inventing all different kinds and sizes and shapes of drums, for he liked us very much, you see. And he used us for everything you can think of, especially in early religious ceremonies, for our loud, booming noise was thought to be very helpful in driving off harmful spirits. My family is made up of 2 groups. The first is called the pitched percussion group. The second group is called the unpitched percussion group. The word pitch means a musical sound in a scale, so that those in my family who can play a tune are called pitched instruments, like this one, while the others who can only beat out the rhythm are called unpitched instruments, like me, for example. We unpitched percussions are often used for dramatic effects, too. In the symphony orchestra, we percussions are placed at the back, behind all the other instruments. This part of the orchestra is called the kitchen because of our shapes. We look like so many pots and pans and kettles in a kitchen. As a matter of fact, one of the most important kinds of drum is actually called the kettledrum. Here are my cousins, the kettledrums, or as they are usually known, the timpani. As you can see, they really do look like great big kettles. Over the top of the kettle is a tightly stretched skin, which can be loosened or tightened to change its sound. These drums can make actual musical notes or pitches, and that means you could even play tunes on a group of them tuned to play different tones. Cousin kettledrum is tuned by hand screws around the rim of the skin. When they are turned, they can either tighten or loosen the skin, and in this way change the note he will play. Once, each of these hand screws had to be carefully turned by hand to just the right position while the rest of the orchestra was playing. But in 1812, a machine drum was made on which all the screws were attached to one big master screw underneath. By turning this one master screw, still by hand by the way, the pitch could be changed. Listen. But in modern kettledrums, this master screw is controlled by a foot pedal that allows the drummer to make instant changes of pitch without any need to stop or interrupt anything else he may be doing. The drummer must have a very sharp ear to make the right changes, since the rest of the orchestra is usually playing away for all it's worth at the same time. My cousins, the kettledrums, have an interesting history. They were first heard by Europeans during the Crusades. Later, the Moorish invaders of Spain used them against the Christian armies they faced. Hundreds of kettledrums were carried in the front ranks, making a fearful noise, for the Moors knew how frightening this insistent, ever-approaching sound could be to their enemies. The Moors also used these drums to send battle signals, as well as to frighten their foes. In today's symphony orchestra, the kettledrums are just about the most important drums there are. Most orchestras have 2 or 3 tuned at different tones and played by one drummer. In some pieces of music, however, many more are needed. The Requiem Mass by Hector Berlioz, for example, uses no less than 16 kettledrums. This is how a kettledrum can build an exciting climax. Listen. I'm the kind of drum you probably have seen most. I'm smaller than Cousin Kettledrum and have not 1, but 2 open sides, each covered with a stretched skin. In my family, there are 3 kinds of drums made like this. Snare drum, that's me, tenor drum, that's Father, and grandfather bass drum. All 3 of us are either made of wood and tuned with a cord around the shell in a zigzag pattern, or of metal and tuned with screws. On all of us, only one of the skins is struck with 1 or 2 sticks. The other skin just echoes the sound and makes it seem louder. As I said, we snare drums are made of wood or metal and are about 15 inches wide. We have snares, which are strings of catgut or wire stretched across our underside. Our snares vibrate when we are struck in a single tap like this, or in rolls by 2 slender drumsticks like this. I sort of sound like a machine gun, don't I? You know, we snare drums are very important in jazz combos. See what I mean? Father tenor drum is a bit wider and deeper than I am and has no snares. His voice is lower and has a much harsher sound. Both of us are played with the batter heads up. The batter head is simply the skin which is usually struck in playing. Biggest of all us drums is grandfather bass drum. He's kept in an upright position while being played with 1 skin on either side. His deep sound is made when he's struck by a heavy stick with a felt or sponge-covered head. Besides us drums, there are several other percussions used in orchestras and bands. For example, Uncle Triangle. He's a steel rod bent into the shape of a triangle, hung on a string, and struck with a metal stick. His sound is a sharp ping. Here are my twin cousins, the cymbals. And believe me, they're two percussion instruments no one can ignore. Whenever a composer wants a crashing climax, he calls for the cymbals. Their sound is so familiar, it seems that there have always been cymbals in our music. But this isn't really so. They were first invented in Turkey in ancient times. They didn't even begin to be used in Western music until the late 18th century, when soldiers returning from wars against the Turkish Empire brought them back to Europe. They quickly became a favorite, and famous composers like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven wrote music in which they used the cymbals. They called it Turkish music. Another important percussion instrument is our Oriental cousin, the gong. Cousin Gong is made of bronze and is so large and heavy that he must be hung within a large wooden frame to be played. To get the fullest sound from him, the player must use a wooden hammer or mallet and strike him in the center. Cousin Gong started life as a religious instrument in the temples of India, Burma, and Malaya, where he can still be heard. It was not until a century ago that Western composers began to use him in their music. This is how he sounds. The tambourine is another member of our family, used by Spanish dancers as well as in the orchestra. The tambourine, like a drum, has a skin stretched across a circular hoop of wood or metal, and is either struck or rubbed by the hand. At the same time, little metal discs fastened around the hoops jingle or rattle merrily. Spanish dancers also play a small percussion instrument called castanets. They are made of wood, hollow, and shaped a little like the two halves of a seashell. In the hands of a skilled player, they can add a great deal to the dramatic effect of a piece of music. My distant relative, the xylophone, is used in orchestras and sometimes in dance bands. Even though he is a pitched percussion instrument, and he is used to play tunes, xylophone has a rather strange tone quality. That's why he's often used for weird or exotic effects. Listen. His brother glockenspiel, on the other hand, is made of steel plates and has a kind of bright and happy sound. Marching bands make great use of a kind of glockenspiel called the bell lyra. You can see why from his shape. Although the bell lyra is lighter than a regular glockenspiel, it is made of steel, and that makes it pretty heavy. That's why the bell lyra is attached to a pole that fits into a special belt the player wears. Without this belt, he couldn't carry this instrument very long or very far. Like its big brother, the bell lyra is also played with a mallet. How many of you know what a bell sounds like? Why, everyone, of course. You've all heard doorbells and telephone bells, fire bells, cowbells, sleigh bells, and even bells on cats' collars. But did you know that bells are a real musical instrument, also part of my great big percussion family? Although we enjoy hearing them, bells can cause a great deal of trouble when played together with other instruments, because they are never really in tune with them. All instruments produce what are called overtones. These are sounds higher than the pitch being played, which harmonize with it. They can't be heard by themselves, but overtones help to give each instrument its own special sound, different from all others. The trouble is that a bell produces a very large number of these sounds, and they clash with the overtones of other musical instruments, including other bells. The result is an ear-jarring sound in music called a discord. Even so, there is an instrument called a carillon, sometimes found in churches, which is nothing more than a set of very large tuned bells. The carillon player sits at a keyboard like that of an organ or piano, and must work very hard with his hands and feet. When he strikes a key, a clapper moves and in turn strikes one of the bells. The tunes played on the carillon must be very simple and must be played rather slowly. Otherwise, those overtones we talked about would clash together, making that jangling, unpleasant sound called a discord. To get a deep, rich sound, ordinary bells must be very large and heavy, often weighing several tons. Such bells would be too clumsy to use or move around, so another instrument is used to produce bell sounds in the orchestra. It is merely a series of hollow-tuned metal tubes hung on a frame, and is called the tubular bells. For the best sound, the player strikes the tubes near the top with mallets. Many years ago, bell ringing was a popular form of entertainment. The bells, properly tuned, are laid out on a table in front of the performers. You might still see bell ringers on TV as a kind of novelty, but not very often. Now you may think from all that you've seen and heard about percussion instruments that people rather enjoy hitting things. And you're perfectly right. All around the world, in just about every land, drums and other instruments that are hit have proven to be enjoyable, entertaining, and often very useful things. You've all heard the word tom-tom, and right away you think of the American Indian drum, the colorful leather and beaded costumes and feathered headdresses. Tom-toms were an important part of religious ceremonies, war dances, celebrations, and were also used to send messages. In Africa, South America, and Asia also, drums have been used to send messages quickly over long distances. Each combination of drum beats had a different meaning which could be read by people far away. These telegraph drums are usually logs hollowed out and struck on the wood itself with two sticks. For many years, drums have been used in military music, but they also played an important part in actual warfare. You remember how the Moors used drums to frighten their enemies and to send orders over the noise of battle? Well, soldiers soon got over their fear of drums, but drums still were important for signaling certain orders during the battle itself. When smoke covered the field or noise drowned out voices, drums could still be heard. The American Revolution began when drummer William Dinman beat the call to arms on Lexington Common, and all the farmers came running with guns and pitchforks to face the British troops. For almost 90 years, from the Revolution up through the Civil War, each company in the United States Army had a fifer and a drummer. Usually, they were very young boys, still too small to be used as regular soldiers. Today, we drums and our many percussion relatives are used in many kinds of music. Latin American dance bands use our cousins, the bongo drums, conga drums, and marimbas. Listen. And as I told you, we drums are always used in playing all kinds of jazz, from early Dixieland and swing to the most modern, progressive jazz of today. We drums, the kitchen of the big orchestra, are an important part of nearly every kind of music, from symphony to opera. That was a little bit of the ballet music from Verdi's opera, Aida. Exciting, wasn't it? Of course, what would a military band be without our family of drums, smartly setting the pace for the marching lines of brightly uniformed paraders? Listen.
Isn't that fun? But I'm afraid it's time to go now. Goodbye from Donald Drum. Hope you've enjoyed meeting all of us percussions. We sure enjoyed meeting you.